Okay. So in the Vijnana.
In the Vijnana, the right relation and action of Purusha and Prakriti are found, because there they become unified and the divine is no longer veiled in Maya. All is his action. The Jiva no longer says, I think, I act, I desire, I feel. He does not even say, like the sadhaka, striving after unity, but before he has reached it, as appointed by thee, seated in my heart, I act. For the heart, the center of the mental consciousness, is no longer the center of origination, but only a blissful channel. He is rather aware of the divine seated above, Lord of all, Adhishthita, as well as acting within him, and seated himself in that higher being, Parardhe, Param Asyam, Paravati. He can say truly and boldly, God himself by his Prakriti knows, acts, loves, takes delight through my individuality and its figures and through my individuality and its figures, and fulfills there in its higher and divine measures the multiple Leela which the infinite forever plays in the universality which is himself forever.
So that's the last paragraph of the chapter. And after that, the next chapter is Gnosis and Ananda. He deals with Ananda. So first he has in this chapter the conditions for attaining to the Gnosis, the supramental level. So let's read the last paragraph. We'll go into detail. In the Vijnana. So as we have said, Sri Aurobindo uses the word Vijnana for the supermind. And the other day, Shilpa was asking whether Atimanas also is used, but I think Atimanas is used by others in the translations, whether in Gujarati or in Hindi. Okay, so, but instead of those, we use the word Vijnana because that corresponds to the Vedic divisions. Okay, so, in the Vijnana, the right relation and action of Purusha and Prakriti are found. And what is that right relation? They are equal to each other. In the lower planes, they are not equal to each other, although both are always together, but they are never equal to each other. One is more, one is less. One is more, one is less. In matter, for instance, very clearly, Purusha is very, very, very unimportant. Or if I should not use the word unimportant, I should say minor. Okay, it's in a sleeping condition. And force is the Shakti, Prakriti is the most dominant in matter. There's energy which we can extract, and that energy is huge. Okay, so that is the relation between Purusha and Prakriti in matter. Then as you go into the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness, the relation is reversed. Consciousness becomes full and Prakriti is held back. It plays a second fiddle, we may say. It plays second. It is there, but it is not released into action, like water behind the dam. It's not released into action. So this is what happens between these two. They are, and Sri Aurobindo says that the relation between each one, okay, and always it amounts to say, let us say 100%, okay. So if it is Purusha in matter is 1% or 2%, matter is Prakriti in matter is 98%. Okay. Then when you come to the second level in the Brahman consciousness, Purusha becomes 98% and what is it? Prakriti becomes 2%. In a way of speaking. And when you go into the Gnosis, the right relation is examined, attained, and both become 50-50. They are equal to each other. In fact, they become one. There's no even relation. They become one. So I'm reading now with this idea. In the Vijnana, the right relation and action also of Purusha and Prakriti are found, because there they become unified and the divine is no longer veiled in Maya. Maya at the lower level is Prakriti, which is hiding the Purusha in matter. But now there is no hiding at all. In fact, in the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness, consciousness is hiding Maya, is hiding the Prakriti. The energy is hidden. But here both are revealed and they are equal to each other. Is no longer veiled in Maya, but it is Maya becomes absolutely para prakriti. It becomes the divine Shakti. All is his action. The Purusha is whatever he is doing, it is his own action. But you can also say in the other way, you can say that Prakriti is also equal to the Purusha. So, all is his action. The Jiva no longer says, I think, I act, I desire, I feel. He does not even say, like the sadhaka, striving after unity, but before he has reached it, as appointed by thee, seated in my heart, I act. Okay. Now I have to find out exactly where this is. I don't think it is there in the Gita. So we have to find out. I tried earlier, but not sufficiently hard. Probably it is there in the Bhagavatam, but I'll try and find out where this quotation is. It is. So this is as appointed by thee, seated in my heart, I act. For this is what he does not even say that, because they are equal to each other. The action and the appointment and the both are all absolutely united with each other. For the heart, the center of the mental consciousness is no longer the center of origination, but only a blissful channel. The individual soul, it becomes only a channel for the supreme truth, Purushottam, to act. He is rather aware of the divine, seated above, Lord of all, Adhishthita, seated above. Okay. Adhishthita is like a supervisor. Okay. So, as well as acting within him. So he is seated above, but is also acting within him. And seated himself in that higher being, Parardhe, in the upper hemisphere, Parardhe, Parardhe, in the higher hemisphere. Paramasyam, Paramasyam, Paravati. This also we have to find out exactly where it is. I'll have to find out and put it down. Paramasyam, Paravati. I'll have to find out and note it down on my computer. He can say truly and boldly, God himself by his Prakriti knows, acts, loves, takes delight through my individuality and its figures, and fulfills there in its higher and divine measures the multiple Leela which the infinite forever plays in the universality which is himself forever. So all are united. Chit, Shakti and Ananda are all united in the Gnosis. And he has also told us earlier what the conditions are for attaining to the Gnosis. First of all, you must have the cosmic consciousness. Without the cosmic consciousness, it is impossible to attain to the Gnosis. Number one. Then the ego must be there. That is even for the spiritual planes of consciousness. There should be no ego, no attachment, no desire. And you must have the cosmic consciousness to be able to rise to the Gnosis. So that completes the chapter with the conditions of attainment to the Gnosis. And the next chapter is the Ananda aspect of the Gnosis. So, chapter 24, Gnosis and Ananda. So, can we go to we start the new chapter? We have plenty of time. So we can start the new chapter, Gnosis and Ananda. So, Sunki, you can read, and then after that, Shilpa will read.
Yes.
Okay? So, Sunki, the ascent to the Gnosis.
The ascent of the Gnosis, the position of something of the Gnostic consciousness, must elevate the soul of man and sublimate his life in the world into a glory of light and power and bliss and infinity that can seem in comparison with the lame action and limited relations of our present mental and physical existence, the very status and dynamism of a perfection, final and absolute. And it is a true perfection, such as nothing before it has yet been in the ascension of the Spirit. For even the highest spiritual realization on the plane of mentality has in it something top-heavy, one-sided, and exclusive. Even the widest mental spirituality is not wide enough, and it is marred too by its imperfect power of self-expression in life. And yet, in comparison with what is beyond it, this first Gnostic splendor is only a bright passage to a more perfect perfection. It is the secure and shining step from which we can happily mount still upwards into the absolute infinities which are the origin and the goal of the incarnating Spirit. In, the in this farther ascension, the Gnosis does not disappear, but reaches rather in its own supreme light, out of which it has descended to mediate between mind and the supreme infinite.
Okay, let's have a look at what he's saying. The ascent to the Gnosis from level 2 to level 3, okay? From the spiritual consciousness to the supramental consciousness. The possession of something of the Gnostic consciousness must elevate the soul of man and sublimate his life in the world into a glory of light and power and bliss and infinity that can seem in comparison with the lame action and limited realizations of our present mental and physical existence, the very status and dynamism of a perfection, final and absolute. A huge sentence, but what he's saying is that in comparison with our mental and physical existence, this is something fantastic. It's a glory. Look at the words. It says sublimate his life, make his life subtle, sublimate it to the highest level. And the glory is, we have to think of the gloriousness of the light, power, bliss, and infinity that can seem in comparison with the lame action and limited realizations of our present mental and physical existence. The very status and dynamism of it. Perfection, final and absolute. You feel the perfection even in the spiritual planes of consciousness, but when you go to the supramental, it seems to be final and absolute. And yet he's telling you later on that you can go even beyond it. Okay? And it is a true perfection, not a half perfection as in this second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness. It's a true perfection, such as nothing before it has yet been in the ascension of the Spirit. So from level 1, when you go to level 2, it's a perfection compared to the lower one, but it's a half perfection because you don't know the divine fully. So it's a, in the Gnosis, it's a true perfection, and in the spiritual planes of consciousness, it's a half perfection. Now, half or even 3/4 maybe, but it is not full perfection. Nothing before it has yet been in the ascension of the Spirit. So it is something totally different from what you have experienced even in the spiritual planes. For even the highest spiritual realization on the plane of mentality has in it something top-heavy, one-sided and exclusive. So what does he mean by that? Let's have a look. He's saying, for even in the highest spiritual realization on the plane of mentality. Now don't confuse the plane of mentality with the level 1. Mentality can go right up to the overmind. That's why he uses the word overmind. Element mind, intuitive mind, overmind, higher mind. These are all the mental planes, but they are spiritual mental planes. At level 1, they are material mental planes. In the spiritual consciousness of level 2, they are all spiritual mental planes, okay, such as nothing before. For even the highest spiritual realization is the overmind. So he is going right up to the overmind, the highest spiritual realization on the plane of mentality. The plane of mentality, we can again say there are 4 levels. Now, the lowest one is the higher mind. The second one, which is slightly higher, is the element mind. Then there is the intuitive mind, and finally have the overmind. These are the 4 planes of the spiritual plane, according to Sri Aurobindo. There are different ways of looking at it, but plane of mentality has in it something top-heavy, one-sided and exclusive. What does he mean by top-heavy? It is not taking enough attention to the level 1. That is what is meant by top-heavy. You are paying too much attention to the subtler planes of consciousness. You are thinking that only the self is real and the physical world is not at all so real. Okay, that's why he is using the word top-heavy. Too much attention on level 2, less attention on level 1. In fact, in some, there is no attention to level 1 at all. Matter is unreal. Okay, Buddhism, Mayavadi, and others. Okay, so this is what we say. Top heavy, that's what it means. One-sided, you are concentrating too much on the Purusha aspect and not the Prakriti aspect. And exclusive, you can even exclude the physical world. So this is what he means by top heavy, one-sided, and exclusive. They can all be different experiences. Even the widest mental spirituality is not wide enough, and it is marred too by its imperfect power of self-expression in life. So what does he mean? In life means in level 1. So even when you rise to the spiritual planes of consciousness in level 2, then you are not able to bring down that realization into level 1. That's what I mean by the self-expression in life. Whatever you have experienced in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you are not able to put into practice in life, in your waking life, in the physical life. And yet, in comparison with what is beyond it, this too, the first Gnostic splendor, is only a bright passage to a more perfect perfection. So, and in comparison with what is beyond it, so he is talking of the overmind level. Even the overmind level is in comparison with the supermind, the first Gnostic splendor, is only a bright passage to a more perfect perfection. The bright passage, splendor and bright passage is the overmind. He says that, okay, he's the highest. He said earlier, the widest and the highest mental is not wide enough. So then he comes to perfect perfection is the supermind. Now he is going even beyond that. It is the secure and shining step from which we can happily mount still upwards. See, even from the supermind we can go still upwards into the absolute infinities, which are the origin and the goal of the incarnating spirit. He's talking about the going from the overmind to the supermind. Okay. Later he says that you can go even beyond the supermind. But when you go beyond the supermind, what happens? He will tell you now. It is a secure and shining step from which we can happily mount. Happily. There is no trouble there at all. Still upwards into the absolute infinities, which are the origin and the goal of the incarnating spirit. The incarnating spirit. Okay? Because those who are not the incarnating spirit, they can disappear into the infinite. But the incarnating spirit is the individual soul which has come down to this physical world and is not rejecting the physical world. The incarnating spirit. The aim of the incarnating spirit is the supermind. That's the aim. In this farther ascension, the gnosis does not disappear. So when you go even beyond, the Gnostic consciousness does not disappear. It continues to remain. That's what he's saying. It's interesting. Okay. So, but reaches rather its own supreme light, out of which it is descended to mediate between mind and the supreme infinite. So the supermind comes, it does not disappear, but reaches rather its own supreme light. He has spoken in Life Divine about the triple status of the supermind. There is status one. The first status is total oneness. Then but with the possibility of the many in it. Then the second level is The oneness is very, very strong, but the many are beginning to come into existence. So if an individual soul rises to the second level of the supermind, he will feel that his individuality is very, very less and he is more the all. And when you come down to the third level of the supermind, the individuality is more prominent and the oneness is becoming more and more into the background. Then from there, when you listen to the overmind level, the oneness becomes almost negligible compared to the individuality. That's what he's saying. The absolute is the origin and in this farther ascension, the gnosis does not disappear, but reaches rather its own supreme life, which would be level 1, out of which it is descended to mediate between mind and the supreme infinite. So between normal mind, now he is using a lowercase mind, and the supreme infinite. This is the divine mother, because the Shakti there is the divine mother, and he says very clearly, the divine mother is the mediatrix. She is the link between the higher spirit and the lower matter. That's exactly what it is, mediation. That's why the Tantra as well as Srim's Yoga, we worship the divine mother, because that's a supramental level and we want to go up to there, the incarnating spirit. Those who are not interested in incarnating spirit, they are the infinite spirit, they disappear into the infinite. Fine, so far as Srimad is concerned, he's not bothered. But he wants to come down again, incarnate in the world. Okay, so this is what he's saying. In this farther ascension, the gnosis does not disappear, but reaches rather its own supreme life, level 1, out of which it is descended to mediate between mind and the supreme infinite. He is not mentioning here, but it becomes Prakriti, the divine mother. She comes down, she is the mediatrix between the highest and the lowest. We can read the next one. Shilpa, you read? The Upanishad tells us. Yeah, go ahead.
The Upanishad tells us that after the knowledge self above the mental is possessed and all the lower selves have been thrown up into it, there is another and the last step of all still left to us, though one might ask, is it eternally the last or only the last practically conceivable or at all necessary for us now to take up our gnostic existence into the bliss self and there complete the spiritual self-discovery of the divine infinite. Ananda, a supreme bliss, eternal, far other and higher in its character than the highest human joy or pleasure, is the essential and original nature of the spirit. In Ananda, our spirit will find its true self. In Ananda, its essential consciousness. In Ananda, the absolute power of its existence. The embodied soul's entry into this highest, absolute, unlimited, unconditional bliss of the spirit is the infinite liberation and the infinite perfection. It is true that something of this bliss can be enjoyed by reflection, by a qualified descent, even on the lower plane where the Purusha plays with his modified and qualified nature. There can be the experience of a spiritual and boundless Ananda on the plane of matter, on the plane of life, on the plane of mind, as well as on the Gnostic truth plane of knowledge and above it. And the yogin who enters into these lesser realizations may find them so complete and compelling that he will imagine there is nothing greater, nothing beyond it. For each of the divine principles contain in itself the whole potentiality of all the other 6 moods of our being. Each plane of nature can have its own perfection of these notes under its own conditions, but the integral perfection can come only by a mounting ascent of the lowest into the highest and an incessant descent of the highest into the lowest till all becomes one at once solid block and plastic sea stuff of the truth, infinite and eternal.
Look at the language. It becomes a solid block. That means totally one. And yet it is plastic. Sea stuff. Like the sea, which is one. And yet it is merging one into the other. Okay. So very interesting paragraph what he's saying. And we'll have a look at that in detail. The Upanishad tells us that after the knowledge self about the mental is possessed and all the lower selves have been drawn up into it, there is another and the last step of all still left to us. So this is they are talking of the five sheets. Okay, there the knowledge self is the Vijnanamaya, and then there is the Anandamaya. So if you want the five planes, we say the Annamaya Purusha, the physical Purusha, the Pranamaya Purusha, the Manomaya Purusha, the mental. Then you have the Vijnanamaya Purusha, and then on top of the Vijnanamaya Purusha is the Anandamaya Purusha, according to the Upanishad. Okay, so the Upanishad tells us that after the knowledge self is the Vijnanamaya Purusha. Above the mental is possessed, and all the lower selves have been drawn up into it. That means all the Annamaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Manomaya Purusha are all drawn up into it. Okay. There is still another and last step of all still left to us. Okay. Then he is himself questioning what he's saying about the last step. So he's saying, though one might ask, is it eternally the last or only the last practically conceivable or at all necessary for us now? So he is asking. If we go above, if our aim is to bring down the divine consciousness into the physical world, is the supermind enough? Or do we have to go even higher up? That's what he's asking. This is the implication of the question. Okay? He's saying, is it eternally the last? That means forever. When you reach the supermind, it is enough forever, or is there something even higher up? That's what he's asking. Or at all necessary for us now to take up our Gnostic existence, the supramental, into the bliss self, the Anandamaya Purusha, and there complete the spiritual self-discovery of the divine infinite. Ananda, a supreme bliss, eternal, far other and higher in its character than the highest human joy or pleasure, is the essential and original nature of the spirit. Essentially, Ananda is absolute, not pleasure at all. It is not even human joy. It is something far superior. In Ananda, our spirit will find its true self. In Ananda, its essential consciousness. In Ananda, the absolute power of its existence. So in other words, when in the Ananda is not only Ananda, it contains also consciousness as well as power. So that's what he's saying. That Ananda is the highest, it contains all. The other planes also contain all these, but in unequal proportions. But in Ananda, that's what he's saying, you find the true self, essential consciousness and absolute power of its existence. The embodied soul's entry into this highest absolute, unlimited, unconditional bliss of the spirit is an infinite liberation and infinite perfection. The highest is the Anandamaya Purusha. It is true that something of this bliss can be enjoyed by reflection, by a qualified descent, even on the lower planes, where the Purusha plays with his modified and qualified nature. So you have to understand what he's saying. Even at the higher mind level, okay, and the illumined mind level, and the intuitive mind level, and lower mind, okay, there is experience of Ananda. But it is qualified and it's a reflection. It's not the full. When you have light coming from the source and you go farther and farther away from light, or there's an obstruction and there's a translucent glass, you don't get the full light. You get a modified light. There is light, but it's modified. Huh? Sometimes you have a transparent glass and you have also what is called a semi-opaque glass. They put things and you don't see, but the light comes through. So that is it. That's what somebody is saying. Qualified descent and the qualified. I think the word is transparent is when the light comes through fully, and translucent, or what's the other word? There's another word. I can't remember the word now, but only the light comes through and you can't see. Sight is not there.
In science, it is translucent, transparent, translucent, and opaque. The three stages.
Translucent and opaque. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So that's what I thought. It is true that something of this bliss can be enjoyed by reflection. It's not that you don't. In fact, that's what happened to Sadhguru. He explains that when he had the first experience, there was intense ananda. Okay? And he found that his shirt had become absolutely wet with tears, the tears of ananda. So it is possible to have ananda even on the lower planes. And how can I say that in lower planes? Because he says that there is no God. Okay, which means that he has not experienced the personal aspect of the divine. So, by definition, he is in the spiritual planes of consciousness. And he says that he had an experience of the Ananda. So, it is true that something of this bliss can be enjoyed by reflection, by qualified descent, even in the lower planes of the spiritual, where the Purusha plays with his modified and qualified nature. So, just see. Playing, okay? There's a relation between the two. There can be the experience of a spiritual and boundless ananda on the plane of matter, on the plane of life, on the plane of mind, as well as the Gnostic truth plane of knowledge and above it. So, it's possible to have this experience of ananda even at the lower levels, you say. And the yogin who enters into these lesser realizations may find them so complete and compelling that he will imagine that there is nothing greater, nothing beyond it. So, I remember one correspondence with Niruddha. Niruddha is complaining that he has never had the experience of Ananda. Okay. But he told us once in the class, okay, we used to have, even after I finished my knowledge, we used to go to him, I think once or twice a week, and in that small room by the side of, that staircase which is there opposite on the northern side, there is a staircase which goes upstairs, which normally the public does not use. We use only the meditation hall staircase. But this one, his room is there, slight small room, and he used to have his kitchen there. He used to live upstairs, Niruddha, but he used to be in the small room, and we used to have our class there. And even our tea parties and all that we used to have there. So on birthdays and all that, he used to make the tea and we used to bring the snacks. So, and he told us once that he had an experience of Ananda. Sri gave him the experience of Ananda. He complaining all the time that there is no Ananda, no Ananda. So he got one. But that Ananda, even at the normal level, okay, is so wonderful that you think it is final. That's what Sri is saying. But it is certainly not final. It becomes even more intense on the second level, the spiritual planes, and becomes complete in the supramental plane. That's what Sri is saying. And the yogin who enters into these lesser realizations may find them so complete and compelling that he will imagine that there is nothing greater, nothing beyond it. For each of the divine principles contains in itself the whole potentiality of all the other 6 notes of our being. So what does he mean by 6 notes? Now he is not talking of the 5 planes of consciousness, the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. He is not talking of that. When he says 6, he is talking of his own system, which is the 7 planes of consciousness. The 7th one is the highest, is the supermind. So, what he means in the 6 notes is matter, number 1, life, number 2, mind, number 3, okay, then number 4, supermind, and Sat, Chit, Ananda. So these are the 7 planes of consciousness, and that's what is meaning by the 6 nodes. Matter, life, mind, supermind, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Okay? So, this is what it means. So, each plane of nature can have its own perfection of these modes under its own conditions. Now note that, it's very interesting. On each plane of nature can have its own perfection of these modes under its own conditions. See, the perfection is made compatible with the conditions of that particular plane. So that's why Mother said that even the animal world is perfect in itself, not in comparison with others. That is exactly what it should be. That's what it means by, and that's why Srila used the word perfect perfection. And perfect perfection is the highest level. But there is perfection at every level, okay, in a very relative manner. So, but the integral perfection can come only by mounting ascent of the lowest into the highest, and an incessant descent, incessant, continuous descent of the highest into the lowest. It all becomes one at once. It all becomes one at once, solid block and plastic sea stuff of the truth, infinite and eternal. Now, this he's saying that the perfect perfection can come not only if you are there in the spiritual, even in the supermental consciousness, if you are going there and not coming down, it's not perfect perfection. The integral perfection can come only, note the word very clearly, by mounting ascent of the lowest into the highest. That means even your physical consciousness must go right up to the superman. Physical consciousness. I'll explain what it means by that, because Mother has explained very clearly. Okay, into the highest, and an incessant descent. Constantly the supermental descent. The consciousness must come down into your body. Okay, into the higher, into the lowest, till all becomes at once solid block and plastic sea substance. So, very interesting that solid block, everything you feel is one, but it is also plastic sea stuff. So, it's very difficult for us to understand how a solid block can become plastic sea stuff, but that's exactly all the contradictions are absolutely possible at the highest level. Now, what does he mean? What does he mean by the lowest must rise to the highest? I'll tell you, because it struck me with great force. That's why I remember. Mother is saying when she had the experience of the supermental boat, okay, she says, normally when you climb up into the higher levels of consciousness, it is very often in trance. In other words, your physical consciousness is not, it is left at the lower level, and your spiritual consciousness, the consciousness mounts into the lower, and you are not conscious of the physical world. It's in trance. And even if it is not in trance, it's a waking samadhi, even then your consciousness is more at the higher level. But she says that I entered the supramental world with my physical consciousness. She says that. And that is why she remembered the experience. Because very often if you are in trance and you go to the highest, you come down, there is a likelihood of not remembering what you have experienced. Likelihood. But she remembered fully all the details. She gives tremendous amount of details. Okay. So this is what is meant by the physical consciousness rising into the highest. And she read that experience of the supramental boat, and you will see how her description is absolutely detailed and perfect. And she says that I was there in that world and I could remember everything because my physical consciousness was there. Okay. And what happened? She wanted to extend the experience further and further because she was selecting people who are good candidates for the supramental world, and those who are not ready, she's sending them back to prepare themselves. And she herself was the one deciding who should come and who should not come. In other words, she has become the supreme divine Shakti. The mother for us is a mortal human being, but she represents the divine Shakti by her own saying, and also Sri Aurobindo saying, she is the supreme divine Shakti. Then she says that the clock started ringing 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was forced to come down. I didn't want to come down, she says. When she came down, because the physical consciousness has gone right up to that level, she remembered the experience fully and she noted it down. Okay, so that's the interesting. So Swami is saying the perfect perfection can come only when the supermind descends even into your physical consciousness, and it should be incessant. It should be a continuous. It's not an what does the word incessant mean? Permanent. You are not going there, experiencing and coming back and falling back into your normal consciousness. Then only a memory will be there, a faint memory, but it should be incessant. Very clear description. Your supramental has to descend into the lower consciousness. That is the aim of the incarnating spirit. Very clear statement of what he's saying. Okay. So the next one, we have already 8:33. So we can't read the next one, because I think the next one is, it's not a very big one. We can read it. So, okay, Gita is there. She is the last one. So the other three have read. So she can read if she is there with her. If she has the text, she can read. Gita, are you there? If you are not, then I will read it. Yeah, you are there? Okay, good. Read it. The very physical consciousness in man.
I thought we won't read it, so I just shut my.
Okay. Then I'll read it. I'm reading it. Okay. The very physical consciousness in man, the Annamaya Purusha, can, without the supreme ascent and integral descent, yet reflect and enter into the self of Satchidananda. It can do it either by reflection of the soul in physical nature, its bliss, power, and infinity, secret, but still present here, or by losing its separate sense of substance and existence in the self, within or without it. The result is a glorified sleep of the physical mind, in which the physical being forgets itself in a kind of conscious nirvana, or else moves about like a thing inert in the hands of nature, jadavat, like a leaf in the wind, or otherwise a state of pure, happy and free irresponsibility of action, balavat, divine childhood. But this comes without the higher glories of knowledge and delight, which belong to the same status upon a more exalted level. It's an inert realization of Satchidananda, in which there is neither any mastery of the Prakriti by the Purusha, nor any sublimation of nature into her own supreme power, the infinite glories of the Para Shakti. Yet these two, this mastery and this sublimation, are the two gates of perfection, the splendid doors of the Supreme Eternal. And this is a very interesting paragraph, and we will discuss it next time. And I will give you even examples of what is this Balavat and Jadavat. Okay, it's very interesting. This can happen, and there are very interesting cases also. Even on the internet, I have found some cases where it is like that. Very clearly, you can identify these things. So, okay, so we'll take up this next time. Next Friday, we'll take up this, the very physical consciousness, on page 499. Suki, do your job. Okay.
I'll make sure.
Yeah. 499, we have to redo the very physical consciousness. Note, the very physical consciousness. You are fully aware, but your consciousness is the highest level. Okay, so I am now closing the connection.
Thank you, Rangada.
Au revoir, everybody.